We're live, 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 we're live.
There we go. I think
There you go. I think
the
You have to mute your mics in here. We're live.
Okay, we'll try this again. Is there any feedback? No? Okay, sounds good. Well, on that dramatic beginning, for the record, I'm Delegate Leslie Lopez here to chair our third and final public hearing that concludes the public input portion of our development review process work group. And so I want to thank all the participants of the work group who are here today and all the folks from our community who are here to speak. Just for the sake of formality, I think it's good for the public to know who's with us and who's on the work group. All of this is available on the website, but just to connect names with faces, I'll read off the names of the work group members, and if you want to wave your hand, we've got from Montgomery Planning, Robert Cronenberg and Christina Sorrento. From Montgomery Parks, we have Henry Coppola. From Montgomery County Council, we've got Pam Dunn and Levu Nadeau. Montgomery County Executive's Office, Meredith Welling and Tom Lewis. Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services, Isan Motiz. I'm so sorry. I knew I was trying to bring momentum to be able to say it correctly. Motizetti. There we go. Montgomery County Department of Transportation, Tim Couples. Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection, Stephen Shofar. Director of the Montgomery County Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, Tiffany Ward. Montgomery County or Maryland State Highway Administration. I don't think they're here. WSSC, Kareem Carpio. From Pepco, Danielle Friedman. Washington Gas, David Schultz. Development Community is represented by Catherine Kuby and Gary Unterberg. Broader Community, Amanda Farber and Cherie Scott. And from Senator Ben Cramer's office, we've got Diane Jones. Perfect. All right. And then just as a matter of housekeeping, we do have two more public work group sessions that people can stream or come to see if they would like to. The next one is next Tuesday from 9:30 to 1:30 at the Wheaton headquarters. And then on Thursday, August 24th from 9:30 to 1:30 also at the Wheaton headquarters. There's likely to be September meetings as well, but those are the ones that have currently been scheduled. And so there won't be a public input at those meetings, but the public is invited to watch and participate in that way. And so today we have a number of people who are here to provide public testimony. As a reminder, everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. And I realize 2 minutes is a short amount of time, but you have unlimited amount of written testimony that you can provide. To be frank about it, I know I often look at the written testimony before I look at recordings. And so if you feel like 2 minutes is a little brief, I apologize for that. We're trying to keep a tight schedule. But please know your written testimony is taken very seriously and is reviewed by all the members of this work group in earnest. The three questions or the three topics that we've posed to community members to kind of focus their remarks for today are number one, your specific experiences with the development review process. Two, your suggestions for improving the development review process. And three, your experiences with the development review process in other jurisdictions. So we have a little bit of a comparison there. And so with that, I'll kick this off to our first speaker. We have Lucy McFadden.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Lucy McFadden. I live in Bethesda. I'm a retired NASA scientist, a volunteer Maryland naturalist, and a member of the Climate Coalition of Montgomery County. Thank you for the opportunity to underscore the importance of your role in implementing Montgomery County Climate Action Plan, which states that the Thrive 2050 master plan will have a major impact on the county's greenhouse gas emissions, carbon sequestration, and adaptation goals. And together, these plans will create a comprehensive approach to adapting climate change at the local level. The following is a list of 10 examples that the development review process needs to incorporate. I will list them until my 2 minutes is up. So one is to update policy codes, operation, and procurement to account for climate change. Require all roofs to be green.
Oh, it looks like we're frozen.
Update public space and streetscape design standards to require cool colored permeable surfaces, to widen bike lanes and sidewalks, and to provide a substantial percentage of vegetation. 4, require green infrastructure practices for new and existing properties, and to reduce and filter runoff.
It sounds like Ms. McFadden has frozen again. Sure.
I do. I'm sorry.
Ms. McFadden, if you're still there, I think
right, but my internet connection is flaky. So in the interest of time, please read my written statement. Thank you.
Sure. I want to provide you an opportunity to say points 2, 3, and 5, because those are the ones that I know that I missed.
Okay. Require all roofs to be green or cool, or to provide photovoltaic systems. 3, what were the other 2 numbers?
2, 3, and 5 were the ones that I missed.
Update public space and streetscape design standards to require cool colored permeable surfaces, wider bike lanes and sidewalks, and a substantial percentage of vegetation, and to retain an increased forest and tree canopy. And I also would like to say, please be intentional about ensuring public application review process makes this happen. Thank you.
All right, Ms. McFadden. I promise to be patient with folks as they navigate internet connections, and I hope people will be patient with me as my household navigates dinner and bedtime. You will probably hear 2 small children causing my husband chaos in the background, so I think we can all just be patient with each other. But all right, Ms. McFadden, thank you so much for your testimony, and I'll be sure to look at your written comments as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next up, we have Philip. I see it spelled 2 different ways, but I'm going to go with Jacobsburg.
Yeah, that's correct. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I would like to share my screen. Can I do that? I mean, it looks like it's disabled right now, that I can't push the button. Can that be fixed or no? If it's not possible, that's fine. I'll just make my verbal testimony and then give a written or something later.
Sure, I would just encourage you to submit the slides or whatever, whatever format they might be.
Well, it was just one image that I wanted to show. It's about a development that's taking place, and I wanted to show what's going on. But so I'll get started with that. It was just supposed to be part of this. But anyway, so I live by the Forest Glen Metro, and there's a development taking place across from it, and it's going to replace our medical center there. And it's going to be a multi-story building, I think 6 or 8 stories, very large. So I live in the neighborhood behind that, which would be Forest Estates, directly behind that building. And, I can present now? All right, let me please do that. Okay, so you should be able to see now my screen. And hold on, let me just try to get you guys back. Okay, great. So you can see on this picture, like, the M is the metro, and across them is our neighborhood. That shaded in building with 200 plus shows. That's the building that they're creating. And I understand the whole concept behind smart growth, building the metro stops to best utilize public transportation, and I'm not opposed to that. And neither are most of the people in our neighborhood. But as currently designed, this project calls for 450 plus car garage. That's huge, okay? And they're planning to put an entrance, is what I'm showing here in the red, onto Woodland Drive, which is directly into our neighborhood. And that is basically how people are going to go onto the Beltway and get south to DC. There's going to be an entrance onto Georgia Avenue, but that only takes you north. So every morning, our neighborhood is going to get flooded by a couple hundred plus cars, which is something that's really unsustainable because it's going to cause huge traffic jams. So the planning board has called for a traffic study as recognizing this, as our neighborhood is alarmed about this entrance. No such entrance currently exists, and my understanding is that during COVID, the zoning was changed to allow for it without consent from our neighborhood. A traffic study is now being done by the developer, not the county, but the party that stands to profit from the entrance. We got a preliminary presentation of that early in July. Needless to say, the traffic consultant's conclusions minimize the impact on our neighborhood. Many of us could see right through it, that the quote unquote, it felt like the fix was in. Because we live in this traffic, and getting out of our neighborhood right now is difficult, as you can see by this line of cars this is what currently exists every day. Add 200 plus cars to that. So where are we? One, we feel disenfranchised by this process. We don't feel like we're getting a fair shake by the county. We feel like we're going to be the sacrificial lambs in a big profit venture by the developer, and the county gets what it wants to. We don't understand how the county considers this entrance, which will dump hundreds of cars in our neighborhood, to be quote unquote smart growth. We don't understand why a traffic study is being done by the developer, not by the county, and an entrance on Woodland Avenue does not have to be part of this project. There are options. So many of us in the neighborhood are considering how to fund our own traffic study at this point. That's where we're at. How do we do this so that we can show what's really going to happen, not what the developer says is going to happen, which he says, oh, it won't be much of a problem. So that's kind of where I'm ending. We feel, we're going to be in touch more. There's a preliminary hearing coming up, and I know that after that, we're pretty much done. It's very hard to stop the development after that. So, we're trying to band together, trying to pull money together to do our own traffic study, which is kind of pathetic in my view. So that's where, this whole process is, and we're very concerned about it. Thank you for listening.
All right, Mr. Jacobsberg, thank you so much. And again, I just recommend if you want to circulate that your document to everyone, just so we all keep track of it. But thank you so much. Next up, we have Roger Cochetti. Let's see. Oh, there he goes. I see him.
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it, sir. Whenever you're ready.
Good. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity. I will be brief, and I'll begin with two quick comments on process. It's my suggestion that in the planning organization, the planning process, in the future, you dispense with promotional and advertising terms like thrive. The planning process in Montgomery County is not a detergent and deserves a much more serious terminology than I have seen in the past. Secondly, I'd also recommend that you dispense with the 120-second testimony limit. I know this is done to prevent abuse, but the chances of somebody abusing it and without involvement by the chair to constrain it are pretty small. My real point is that I think the planning process, and I haven't had a lot of contact with it, what little contact I've had with it suggests to me that It is not data-driven and should be data-driven. Instead of ideological, activist, or politically driven, it should be driven by statistics and real numbers. The example I'll use, because I'm an enthusiastic bicyclist and have been a bicyclist for 60 years and actually commuted on my bike to work in the 1970s before it became fashionable, is the use of what had been automobile lanes for bicycle lanes, which clearly works to the disadvantage of the overwhelming majority of Montgomery County residents, the very tiny minority. If you look at the demographics of those who bicycle as commuters in the winter, the number is infinitesimally small. It's principally males between the ages of 20 and 35 or in the top quartile of income. It is to their benefit that every other segment of the population, 99+%, are disadvantaged. This is a classic case for me of making plans based on ideology, activism, and politics, and not based on data. What should drive the planning process, in my judgment, is data-driven analysis, which I have seen precious little of, and I would encourage in the future be the centerpiece of anything that's done in the planning process. So those are my thoughts. Good luck with your work, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cuccetti. So with this public hearing is exclusively commentary from the public. We're not going to engage in questions, but certainly if there are questions that people on the work group have, if you've made your information available to folks with written testimony, we know the best way to follow up with you. Yeah, so there's the avenue there. You just submit written testimony that has your name and however you prefer to be contacted. Cool.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right, next up we have Wendy Calhoun.
Hello and good evening. I wish to thank and congratulate this committee on reaching out to the community to ask for their feedback on the development process. While very few of the current planning board know me, their predecessors and much of their staff do. My name is Wendy Calhoun. I'm a Montgomery County resident of 28 years, a homeowner of 23 years, a parent for nearly 21 years, and a former Montgomery County Council of PTA's cluster coordinator for Walter Johnson Cluster. I've testified dozens of times before the planning board, and I thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts and provide feedback at this time. First, I would ask you to encourage the planning board to reach out to impacted communities much earlier in the planning process, when their opinions, feedback, and testimony can actually make a difference. In my experience, by the time a community learns about a project and is offered the opportunity to give testimony, it's too late. At that point, the project is going forward and the community feedback is a mere exercise, a way to check the box that the board has actually received input. Second, and perhaps more importantly, I urge you to encourage the planning board to incorporate the community's input into their actions, to please listen to the community perspective, not only your own perspective and the developer's perspective. The developers are there to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money, but their money should not have a negative impact on current residents. We live in the places in which the board is making changes. Every day we live and breathe the impact of the board's decisions have on traffic, overcrowded schools, flooding from runoff, and so much more. I know that the planning board and this committee cares about the county and its residents. Otherwise, none of you would be doing what you do. However, unless you live in the area directly impacted by the decision at hand, the action taken is numerical and remote. For those who come before you to testify, the action taken is personal and direct. And while not all community ideas can be implemented, it would be nice to have the input acknowledged and the reasoning behind decisions given. Thank you for allowing me this time this evening, and I hope you will act on my suggestion. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Ms. Calhoun. And you, I think we're 2 seconds under, so if there's anything you'd like to say.
Just that I've done this dozens of times and I can follow directions.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Up next, we have David Foreman.
Thank you for this opportunity. Whoops, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
I think actually I'll forego my testimony and continue to listen and rely on a written submission.
Sure. All right. that's fine. Perfect. All right. Up next on our list is Peter Safari.
Hi, good evening. My name is Peter Safari. I'm an attorney with McMillan Metro with offices in Potomac, but I'm here tonight in my role as the chapter chair for the Montgomery chapter of the Maryland Building Industry Association. MBIA represents 1,000 member companies statewide, and approximately 200 of those companies do business in Montgomery County. Now, we've advocated for a streamlined development process in Montgomery County for years, and I think many of you in the work group and at planning have worked with us to promote those goals in the past. Now, we've been supportive of last year's efforts by planning to improve its DRC process, and those meetings generated some tangible improvements in development and review. The DRC work group was a good example of the kinds of problems that exist in Montgomery County, and also a good example of how problems can be fixed. Montgomery planning focused on making incremental changes and adjustments to the process and timelines, and the result was more certainty in the development and review committee stage of a project application. It also opened the line of communication for future efficiency. The reason I bring that up is because MBIA encourages this work group to focus on that kind of street-level incremental change that would show immediate improvement to timelines and mitigate risk for applicants. For example, we support streamlining response times and adding staff capacity to the intake process. We support amending and better defining agency comment deadlines for improved agency coordination. We support further outreach and education programs by planning and DPS, which they've already started. And our members also find that one of the most painful parts of the process can often exist after the planning board review. So to address that pain point, we support a better organized post-preliminary plan process that substantially matches the DRC process and helps solve conflicts between agencies before there's a lot of delay and confusion. We support a proposal for digital signatures for plat recordation by the planning director, and we also support the recommendation to allow for review of final engineering plans ahead of full site plan certification. However, we do need to make clear that we don't support the proposal to move Montgomery planning out of its independent commission posture and into the ambit of the executive. And we've heard no real meaningful explanation for how that change would benefit the development process. And frankly, taking away planning's longstanding autonomy and apolitical technical review functions would be misplaced and short-sighted. That change is an attempt to solve a problem that doesn't exist. So thank you for your attention tonight, and I'd be happy to meet individually with any of the workgroup members who'd like me to expand on these comments or the written comments that we earlier submitted. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Safari. Up next, we have Matt. Is it Passanelli or Pacinelli?
Pacinelli. Thank you.
There we go. All right, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. My comment is probably a general one that isn't applicable for this particular development review discussion, but I wanted to express some concern. I'm a member, I'm obviously a resident of Montgomery County and a member of a number of community associations. And I think the thing that got our attention first was the obviously Thrive in general, but the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative that was created surrounding the concept of the elimination of the R60 zone. So I understand we're talking about development review, but before we get to development review, we need to address zoning and our grave concern about the concept of introductions of and the ease of passage of zoning text amendments that make broad, dramatic changes to zones that would obviously impact hundreds of thousands of residents. And so I just wanted to go on record that this is something that should be addressed. The ease at which a zoning text amendment can be implemented, to me, seems simpler than some individual development submissions. So I think that sort of seems backwards to me, and should have as lengthy and open and a process and transparent process as any development project as a whole. Hopefully that makes sense.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thank you, sir.
Very well. Thank you.
All right. And did you submit written testimony? I don't see it in here.
I did not because the deadline was before I was aware of the meeting.
That's okay.
I'm happy to submit it.
It's a rolling basis thing. So if there is a public, a comment that you would like to make in testimony, we'll continue receiving it.
I will do that as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. All right. Next up on my list, I have Stephen Robbins. Mr. Robbins.
Can you see me okay? Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, good evening, Delegate Lopez and members of the committee. My name is Steve Robbins, and I'm an attorney at the law firm of Lord Shirley and Brewer here in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm testifying tonight as an individual. Our land use group will be submitting written comments shortly. I have been practicing in the county since 1986 and have worked on many development projects. I have firsthand experience working with park and planning, with DPS, DEP, DOT, and other county and state agencies associated with the development review process. I continue to support the independent functioning of park and planning. Eliminating this independence likely could have consequences of unwelcome influence, positive or negative, depending upon your views on the process. In my view, as stated by the prior speaker, the independent nature of park and planning is a good thing that does not need to be quote unquote fixed. There continues to be some problems with agency coordination, reviewing applications. Committing to improving timely reviews, establishing a process for resolving conflicts, and addressing overlapping roles and authority would be welcome. Work is needed to improve the case intake process. While there has been some improvement, it still is taking far too long for applications to be accepted for review. This could be addressed by imposing time limits on the intake process and limiting the review more to making sure an application itself is complete rather than substantive comments about the application itself. Two areas that have long been discussed and while admittedly have improved are the site plan certification process and record plat process. They too are taking too long. Establishing time periods for review also may be appropriate. Traffic mitigation agreements and plans also are taking too long for review. There should be a time period set for review once the document is submitted to Park and Planning and DOT. Strong consideration should be given to providing the planning director at Park and Planning greater authority to approve certain plans and administrative amendments. This would reduce unnecessary staff and board time on matters that could be delegated to the director. Finally, we are very fortunate in our county to have competent and committed staff at Park and Planning and the county agencies like DPS and DOT as part of the process. There certainly are improvements that can and should be made to the process while leaving the existing framework of the various agencies in place. And just to mention, I have not submitted written comments yet, but I will get those in. And also our land use group, as I mentioned earlier, will get in comments for the benefit of this committee. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. I put this in the chat, but just to say it on the record for anyone who might be listening, if you would like to submit written testimony and we're not able to make it to the last three public hearings, you can do so at development@montgomeryplanning.org, or you can email meredith.wellington@montgomerycountymd.gov. Those are two addresses who are taking testimony. All right, next up we have the Honorable Al Carr, who previously was chair of the Metro Washington Area Committee.
Good.
Delegate Carr. Oh, there you are.
I am the Sierra Club Montgomery County Group. And in the interest of time, I'm going to speak to just one of the 5 points we raised in our written testimony. To meet Montgomery County's aggressive climate goals, we need to electrify our buildings and transportation. The big storms we had this past weekend are reminders that the grid is vulnerable to weather. So it's important to maximize the opportunities to bury power lines to protect against weather-related outages and to support electrification. Redevelopment is a great opportunity for smart undergrounding, but the planning department often lacks expertise and guidance, and the utilities are absent. What I've observed is projects that have been in the pipeline for over a year arrive at the planning board public hearing phase without an agreement on the basic facts, such as what are the undergrounding options? What are the costs? What are the best practices? What was decided on similar projects in the recent past? What utility work is already planned for nearby? As a result, the planning board wastes time hashing these things out during public hearings. And as a result, the decisions are not optimal. They're not consistent across the county or even within sector plans. They're not coordinated with nearby projects, and we are missing opportunities to fortify the grid and protect the tree canopy. Solution number one is to advance the adoption of a functional utility plan as recommended in the Complete Streets Design Guideline. And solution number two is for the utilities to begin participating in Development Review Committee meetings. According to planning staff, with the exception of WSSC, utilities have been largely absent from Development Review Committee meetings this year. Thank you.
Sorry, I did not realize I was on mute. 3 years into using Zoom here. All right, up next we have Mr. Ryan Hall.
Thank you. So my experience is as a current resident of Kensington Estates. The area of Kensington near Knowles Avenue and Summit is already one of the worst intersections in Montgomery County. It suffers minor to severe flooding every time it rains. It also has a tremendous amount of traffic, yet there still seems to be a lot of development, and the process, I believe, needs to be improved. I recently followed the process correctly for one of the flats developments, and I testified asking for clarifications to approvals, and I didn't find that the county addressed any of the questions in my review. For example, the flats development was approved with a traffic study done during December 2020, where there was no school, COVID, holiday season. The stormwater management measurements were wrong. In fact, residents had to go down into the storm management system themselves and measure, and then have a delegate actually find this out. And then actually the 2016 to 2020 subdivision strategy policy was used when the 2020 to 2024 plan was approved a week before the submission. In my career as a federal service employee, these errors would nullify the agreements and you'd be forced to do new proposals. I would love if the county continue the feedback loop and actually explain why processes happened or what needs to be happened to fix it in the future. I do have more, so I'll try to be respectful of the 2 minutes. As well as the other development on the corner, 10500 Summit Ave. I've noticed that the community meetings had incorrect dates. The days and postage signage were wrong. The developer actually was having a selling point that the development would make the area worse. I don't think that's a good sign for the county if development's not going to make it worse. And I do think that it'd be nice to know that the current policy and infrastructure is taken into account well before the review process. Also, I'll submit the written, but I think for suggestions, there was a meeting on June 1st for the BPPA public input presentation. I found this to be really helpful. This is where leaders were talking about pedestrian plans. They acknowledged firsthand what we were looking at, explained how analysis was being done, took feedback, and then showed us how to follow up. And with my interaction with other counties in Ohio and Texas, I think that Montgomery County seems to be a little bit more developer-centered, and they do connect with the community more frequently, but it is not as early in the process, and it is harder for residents to navigate that process. Also, it seems that the other counties I've worked with focus on the underlying foundational infrastructure first, not what will be placed there when it's ready. Thank you.
Gotcha. All right, thank you, Mr. Hall. And our last person providing testimony today is Ms. Peggy Dennis.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Longtime resident of Potomac, Maryland, and I'd like to say Wendy Calhoun hit the nail right on the head. Community involvement in any development proposal needs to be right from the beginning, not partway through, not when the staff has already been working with the developer, and certainly not anywhere later in the process. when you divorce communities from any kind of a major development within their confines, you are hitting yourself up for big problems, lawsuits, animosity, people feeling that they have not been heard and have not been considered. I'd also like to say, Mr. Jacobsberg was talking about developers providing statistics and analysis. This is really egregious. Developers can hire an expert to give them whatever outcome they want. And this is extremely difficult for communities to fight back against. Experts will give whatever they are paid to give. Communities must be involved in the development process from the very beginning. Everything must be transparent, and they should be listened to. This will avoid all sorts of bad feelings and bad outcomes in the long run. Thank you. Can't hear you, Leslie.
Sorry, I'm trying to be mindful of the noise pollution in my background here. But Mr. Foreman, we skipped you the first time around, but you do have your 2 minutes. If you would like to say something now, I want to honor that.
I guess the only thing I might say is perhaps a little postscript to what Mr. Cocchetti said, which I agree with, and it has to do with automobiles. Because on the one hand, there is, I think, in the planning world, a real desire to reduce auto traffic, to reduce the pollution that autos cause, but I just want to enter a plea, though, for a more sophisticated approach. A simple approach to simply try to control automobiles by reducing parking places doesn't reduce automobile traffic. It leads to sort of Georgetown, Adams, Morgan people going around and around the block looking for parking spaces, for instance. My belief is that there are more sophisticated ways that the total amount of auto traffic can be controlled that don't involve radical reduction in the opportunity, let's say, for parking. Things like speed bumps, like more enforcement, like these various schemes that actually make it more expensive to drive during rush hour, and so on. So I just like to urge that in planning that a more sophisticated approach be used to traffic management. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. All right, so with that, our third and final public hearing has concluded for the Development Review Committee work group. We will, just to say it again one more time, we will still be accepting written testimony from folks who feel like, perhaps as you've spoken today, some things might be jogged in your memory that you would like to express via written testimony. We'll still be accepting that. Again, it is development@montgomeryplanning.org or meredith.wellington@montgomerycountymd.gov. Those are two addresses that you can send your written testimony to. Again, we have 2 more work group meetings in the books that will be live stream August 8th and August 24th from 9:30 to 1:30. They will be in person at the Wheaton facility, the Wheaton headquarters for park and planning, and likely to be another meeting in September as well. So I want to thank everyone in the public who joined us today. I think that we're making some real progress, and we'll be coming up with some significant but incremental steps here. And we will have some product that will become public by October 15th, because that is the deadline for me to submit bills. And so that will be something that I have a hard and fast deadline with that I can't get around. And so you'll see it definitely by then, likely earlier. And I want to thank everyone on the work group for joining us and your full participation. You are subject matter experts, and I appreciate your time that you're contributing to this effort. So thank you to everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.